Hello, now we're going to look at some functions that combine some of the things we've gone over in the previous sections. So here they give you an example of a rational function, but it also has a radical in it, right? And which almost everything's just about the same except for the domain. Before we wouldn't want this to be 0, but we also cannot take the square root of negative numbers. So we know that x plus 1 has to be strictly greater than 0. If we solve that, we know that the domain is x has to be greater than negative 1, and that's what they've written right here. And then the range, nothing's changed from a parent function where y has to be greater than or equal to 0. So over here, when you graph this function, you do still have an asymptote at negative 1 right here. It'll get really close to it, won't touch it, but anything after that would make this negative, so it doesn't even exist over here. And then this is what this type of function looks like. So this section deals with combining some of the things we have. Another one we can look at is example 9. It says determine the domain and range, and then confirm graphically. Well, I know that the domain doesn't really change much on this one. 2x plus 1, I know it can't be equal to 0, right? So subtract 1, I know I got a negative 1/2. So my domain is going to be x such that x not equal to a negative half, right? The range here doesn't really change anywhere. I know that y, my horizontal asymptote, is just going to be 0 again, right? And my range is going to be y such that y not equal to 0, right? So nothing's really changed much, but I am taking the absolute value of this. So if I were just to start the graph, what would it look like? Well, I know I have a vertical asymptote at a half, and then a horizontal asymptote at the y equals 0 or the x-axis. When I plug in 0, I get 1, so I know it's over here it's going to look like this, right? But if I plug in negative 1, I'd get 1 over negative 2 plus 1, but it's got to be the absolute value, which is 1 over negative 1, which is just 1. So it just goes like this. So now you can see what happens. It just looks like this. It's pretty much a mirror image of it. Just made everything positive. It should look more symmetrical. Sorry about that, but that's what it's supposed to look like. Sound good? Thanks.